The arrival of the weapon in the vastness of the universe far beyond the stars, where humans could only dream to reach a highly advanced alien race watched them from the shadows of their own galaxy. The humans were seen as primitive. Their technology was in its infancy compared to the cosmic civilizations that surrounded them. But there was something about humans that fascinated the alien race. They could see potential in the humans, a spark of something greater. They just needed the right push. To unlock it, the decision was made to give the humans a gift, something that would propel them forward, something that no other species had been trusted with, a weapon beyond imagination, not one of destruction or war, but one of creation and limitless possibility. It was a small object, no bigger than the palm of a hand. It looked harmless, nothing that would make any person tremble, but it held power unlike anything the humans had ever seen. It could manipulate time, alter the fabric of space, and bend the laws of energy itself. The aliens saw the gift as the key to unlocking humanity's true potential. They believed that with the right guidance, the humans would use the weapon to heal their world, to create a future of peace and prosperity. They were wrong, but they did not yet know it. The humans were presented with the weapon in a grand ceremony. It was carefully placed before their leaders, their scientists, and their military advisors. But when the weapon was revealed and the humans laid eyes on it, their first reaction was not awe or fear, but confusion, and then laughter. The weapon was not something fierce and imposing. It was small and round, with an odd shimmer to its surface. Its edges were soft, and it had no sharp angles. It looked almost like a plush toy, a small creature of some kind, rather than a tool of unimaginable power. One of the humans reached out to touch it, and when they did, the creature let out a soft cooing sound and blinked up at them with large, innocent eyes. The human smiled at it and muttered, "It's cute." Without thinking, another human laughed and said, "It looks like something out of a child's storybook." The rest of the humans chuckled in agreement. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the weapon they had entrusted to these beings was laughed at as if it were nothing more than a toy. The aliens could not understand how the humans could be so oblivious to the power contained within the small creature. They had underestimated the humans' perception of power. They had not expected the weapon to be seen as cute. It was not just a tool for the humans to use, it was the key to their future. And yet here, they were dismissing it as nothing more than an oddity. The aliens were shaken. Their plan was unraveling before their eyes. But they did not give up. They knew that the humans would eventually understand the weapon's true purpose. They had to believe it. They had to trust that the humans would grow and evolve. When they realized the weapon's potential, meanwhile, the humans began to interact with the weapon, not understanding its true nature. They treated it like a pet or a companion, rather than a tool of destruction. Its presence in their lives was harmless. They fed it, played with it, and watched as it responded to their actions. The more they interacted with it, the more it seemed to evolve in strange ways. Its surface shifted colors in response to the humans' emotions, and it began to mimic their actions. It would heal wounds or create small comforts like food or warmth, but nothing that would alarm them, nothing that would hint at the vast potential hidden within it. Aliens watched this with growing concern as the humans became attached to the creature. They began to see it not as a weapon, but as a friend, something they could not live without. It became a source of joy and wonder to them. They marveled at how it seemed to know exactly what they needed at any given moment. But the aliens were not amused. They could see that the humans were not using the weapon for their advancement. They were treating it as something cute, something trivial. They saw it as a toy rather than the weapon of immense power it truly was. But what the aliens did not know was that the humans were beginning to understand something they had not expected. The weapon was not just a tool, it was a reflection of humanity itself. It responded to the emotions of those who interacted with it. It did not create destruction or chaos. It created connection. It brought people together. It healed their wounds and their hearts. The humans were beginning to see that the true power of the weapon was not in its destructive potential, but in its ability to bring peace and unity. As the weapon continued to evolve with the humans, its power grew stronger, but instead of using it for war or dominance, The humans used it to heal the planet, to end conflicts, and to cure diseases. The weapon's energy was not harnessed for conquest. It was used for creation, for building something better for everyone involved. The aliens watched from their distant ships as the humans began to change their world with the power of the weapon they had once deemed harmless. The weapon was becoming more than just a tool. It was becoming a symbol of humanity's capacity for growth and compassion. The aliens were stunned. They had not expected this. They had not anticipated that humans would see the weapon's power not as a means of control, but as a means of healing and connection. The story was far from over, but in this moment, the aliens were forced to confront the reality that the humans had already begun to surpass their expectations. They had seen the weapon as a way to control the humans had taken the weapon and used it to create something entirely different, something beautiful and unexpected. And as the humans continued to unlock the weapon's potential, the aliens had to face the truth that they had given humanity something far more powerful than they had ever imagined, not because it could destroy worlds, but because it could change them for the better. Unleashing the power. The days that followed were filled with wonder as the humans continued to interact with the small creature they had dubbed the weapon. They called it cute, but they also called it a miracle as the creature began to show its true abilities. It could heal wounds and cure sickness with a single touch. It could create food and water from nothing. It could even change the very atmosphere around them, providing comfort to those in need. The humans marveled at what it could do, but they still did not fully understand the depths of its power. The aliens watched with a mixture of awe and frustration. They had given the weapon to the humans, expecting them to wield it as a tool of conquest. But instead the humans were using it to build communities and foster peace. They were not using it for war or control. They were using it to heal the world, to bring people together, and to create a future of harmony. The aliens had not foreseen this. They had expected humanity to be ruthless and hungry for power, but instead they were seeing a different side of the humans, one that was focused on growth and empathy. The human leaders began to notice the changes taking place around them. The weapon had begun to alter the fabric of their society. It had brought people together. It had ended wars and healed the sick. But there was something else, something deeper, that the humans could not yet comprehend. The weapon was not just changing the world, it was changing them. It was bringing out their better selves, their capacity for kindness and compassion, their desire to help one another and build a better future. The scientists who had studied the weapon began to understand its true nature. It was not a tool to be controlled, but a force to be embraced. They realized that the weapon was not meant to be used for destruction, but for creation, for the betterment of all life. The more they interacted with it, the more they learned about its capabilities. They could feel its energy pulsing through them as it responded to their thoughts and emotions. It was as if the weapon was alive and attuned to the humans' very souls. One scientist in particular, a woman named Dr. Emily Grant, became obsessed with the weapon. She saw its potential, not just as a tool for healing, but as a way to advance humanity beyond anything they had ever imagined. She saw a future where the weapon could be used to solve problems that had plagued humanity for centuries: hunger, poverty, disease, even the very nature of life itself. She began to believe that the weapon could unlock the answers to all of humanity's greatest challenges. But as Dr. Grant's obsession with the weapon grew, so did her desire to control it. She began to push the boundaries of what the weapon could do. She began experimenting with its power, trying to unlock more of its secrets. She wanted to use it to shape the world in her image, to create a perfect society where all of humanity's problems could be solved once and for all. She did not understand the true nature of the weapon, though, and in her quest for control, she began to make dangerous decisions. The weapon began to change in response to her experiments. It became more unpredictable, its energy fluctuated, and its effects became stronger and more erratic. At first the humans saw only positive results, but soon they began to notice the consequences of Dr. Grant's actions. The more she tried to control the weapon, The more it seemed to push back, it began to create unexpected side effects, things that no one could explain. Entire ecosystems began to change in strange and unexplainable ways. Plants grew faster than they should. Animals began to evolve in ways that defied logic. The world itself seemed to be shifting as the weapon's power grew stronger. Dr. Grant ignored the warnings of her colleagues who urged her to stop her experiments. She was convinced that she could control the weapon and that she could use it to create the perfect world, but she was wrong. The more she pushed the weapon, the more it began to resist her efforts. The weapon was not meant to be controlled. It was a reflection of humanity itself, a force that could not be manipulated or bent to one person's will. It responded to the collective emotions of the humans. It could not be shaped by one individual's desires. The aliens watched from a distance as the humans began to unravel the weapon's true power. They had given weapon to the humans with the hope that it would bring about peace and prosperity. But now they saw the dangers of the weapon's potential. The more the humans used it, the more they began to depend on it, the more they relied on its power to solve their problems. They no longer saw it as a tool to be used. They saw it as a crutch, something they could not live without. The aliens realized that they had made a mistake. They had given humanity a gift that they were not ready for. They had underestimated the humans' capacity for growth, but they had also underestimated their capacity for destruction. The weapon was not just a tool of creation, it was also a tool of chaos and destruction if used recklessly. Humans were beginning to understand the true nature of the weapon, but they were also starting to see the consequences of their actions. They were realizing that they could not control it. They could not make it bend to their will. They had to learn how to coexist with it, to work with it, not to dominate it. As the weapon continued to evolve, it began to shift the world in ways that no one could predict. Entire cities were reshaped as the weapon's power spread across the globe. The humans were both awed and terrified by what they had unleashed. They could feel the weight of the responsibility they now carried. The weapon was no longer just a gift, it was a force of nature, and they were its caretakers. The weapon's energy pulsed through the air like a living entity. It responded to the humans' collective emotions. It grew stronger when they were united and weaker when they were divided. It could heal, and it could destroy. It could create, and it could unravel the very fabric of reality itself. The humans had to learn to control it, or risk losing everything they had worked so hard to build. The aliens watched as the humans began to struggle with the weapon's power. They had given it to them with the hope that they would use it to build a better future, but they now saw that the weapon was not just a tool of peace. It was a force of balance, a force that could tip the scales of the universe in either direction, depending on how it was used. The humans had begun to understand the weapon's true nature, but it was no longer just about using it for good or for evil. It was about learning to live with it, learning to respect its power, and to understand that with great power came great responsibility. The savage hunters. The weapon continued to evolve. It became increasingly clear that its power was not just altering the world, but reshaping humanity itself. What once began as a tool of healing and peace had transformed into something much greater and more dangerous. The humans had learned to use it for their benefit, but they had also begun to rely on it far too much. The weapon was no longer just a small cute creature. It had become a force to be reckoned with, a living entity that responded to the emotions and desires of those who interacted with it. And as the weapon's power grew stronger, so too did the humans' dependency on it. At first the changes were subtle. The weapon's influence was felt in small ways. Entire cities were rebuilt more efficiently, using its abilities to manipulate materials and energy in ways that had never been possible before. Hunger was eradicated and diseases were cured. But as time went on, the weapon's influence began to reach further than anyone could have predicted. Entire ecosystems began to shift. Animals evolved at an accelerated rate, and the very landscape itself began to change, as if the planet was being remade from the inside out. It was as though the weapon had become a catalyst for evolution itself. But not all of the changes were for the better. In the wilds of the planet, a savage predator was born, one that was not of natural origin, but rather an unintended consequence of the weapon's power. This creature was unlike anything seen before it, was a massive and terrifying beast born of the planet's primal instincts and the raw energy of the weapon. Its very presence struck fear into the hearts of all who encountered it. It was a hunter one that would stalk its prey with ruthless precision and consume all in its path, and as it grew stronger it began to target the humans themselves. The first attack came without warning. A small group of humans was out exploring the outskirts of their newly rebuilt city when they were ambushed by the creature. The beast was fast and vicious. It tore through the group with ease, killing without hesitation and leaving nothing behind but destruction and chaos. The humans were not prepared for the attack. They had never encountered a predator like this before, and they had no way of defending themselves against its strength and speed. As news of the attack spread, panic began to set in. The humans realized that the very weapon they had trusted to bring them peace had now given birth to a terror unlike anything they had ever known. The creature was relentless. It hunted, not out of hunger, but out of an instinctive drive to kill and destroy. It was a savage beast that had no remorse or empathy, and it would not stop until it had claimed its prey. The weapon itself seemed to be aware of the creature's existence, as if it had created it unintentionally. But despite its immense power, the weapon could not control the predator it had unleashed. The humans had thought that the weapon's abilities could be used for good, but they were now beginning to see that it was not something that could be tamed or bent to their will. The creature was a force of nature, something that could not be reasoned with or pacified. The humans now faced a new dilemma. They had to find a way to stop the creature before it destroyed everything they had worked so hard to build. They could no longer rely on the weapon to protect them. It had become both a blessing and a curse, and the humans had to learn to fight on their own terms. Small group of humans led by a seasoned warrior named Captain Elias Gray was tasked with tracking down and eliminating the creature. They were the best of the best, highly trained soldiers who had faced countless threats in their time, but nothing had prepared them for the savage beast they were about to encounter. As faced countless threats in their tanda, they ventured into the wilderness. They encountered strange and unsettling sights. The landscape had changed dramatically in the wake of the weapon's influence. The trees had grown taller and thicker. The rivers had shifted their courses, and the animals that once roamed freely had evolved into something more dangerous. It was as though the very fabric of nature had been altered, and the balance of life was now in disarray. Captain Gray and his team pressed on, knowing that they had to find the creature before it found them. They could feel its presence in the air, its energy radiating through the environment like a storm waiting to break. The tension in the group was palpable. They knew that this was a fight for survival, and only one side would come out victorious. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, they finally encountered the creature. It was even more terrifying than they had imagined. It stood towering over them, with glowing eyes and sharp claws that seemed capable of ripping through steel. The creature let out a roar that shook the earth beneath their feet and charged at them with incredible speed. Captain Gray and his team were ready. They opened fire with everything they had, but their weapons had no effect. The creature seemed invincible. Its hide was too tough for their bullets to penetrate, and its sheer strength overwhelmed them. The battle raged on, with the humans desperately trying to hold their ground, but it was clear that they were outmatched. The creature's speed and power were far beyond anything they had ever faced. They had relied on their technology and weapons to fight their battles, but now they were facing something that defied all logic and reasoning. A moment of desperation, Captain Gray made a decision that would change everything. He ordered his team to retreat while he stayed behind to face the creature alone. He knew that he had no chance of defeating it, but he hoped that, by sacrificing himself, he could buy enough time for his team to escape and regroup. As the creature closed in on him, Captain Gray made a final stand. He fought with every ounce of strength he had, but he was no match for the beast. The creature overpowered him and struck him down, but before it could finish him off, something unexpected happened. The weapon responded to Captain Gray's will. It shifted and transformed into a shape. He had never seen before a massive barrier of energy formed around him, protecting him from the creature's final blow. The weapon had chosen to save him. It had reacted to the human's desire to protect and fight for survival, and in doing so, it had evolved once again this time. It was not just a tool, it was a protector, a force that had bonded with Captain Gray's will to survive, and it had used its power to shield him from the creature's wrath. The battle was far from over, but now the humans had a chance to fight back. They had learned something crucial. The weapon was not just a tool for creation, it was a reflection of their willpower and their emotions. It could adapt and evolve based on their desires and intentions. It was not a force to be controlled, but one to be understood and harnessed. The humans had survived their first encounter with the savage predator, but they knew that this was only the beginning. The weapon had shown them that it could protect them, but it had also shown them that it was not invincible. It was a force of nature, and they would have to learn how to coexist with it and respect its power if they were to truly survive the hunt that lay ahead. The dead-end canyon. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange hue across the vast wilderness as Captain Elias Gray and his team made their way through the treacherous canyon. The battle with the savage creature had left them battered but alive, and for the first time since the weapon's arrival, they had felt true fear. The weapon had saved them, but it had also shown them the depths of its power and the dangers it posed. The team moved cautiously, aware of the creature's lingering presence somewhere in the shadows of the canyon. The canyon was narrow and winding. The walls were jagged and rough, and the air was thick with tension. Every step felt heavy, as if the very earth beneath their feet was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. Captain Gray's mind raced as he thought about the creature. They had barely escaped from its clutches, and now they were trapped in this desolate place with no clear way out. The weapon pulsed softly in his hands, its soft glow providing the only light in the canyon. Its once innocent appearance now seemed like something far more ominous. The humans had come to rely on it, but now they were beginning to realize that it was not just a tool. It was an unpredictable force that responded to their emotions, desires, and fears. They had to learn to control it before it controlled them. As they pressed deeper into the canyon, the air grew colder, the walls closing in on them as if the land itself was conspiring to trap them in this place. Captain Gray signaled to his team to stop. The sense of danger was palpable. The creature was close. They could feel it in the air, its presence like a dark cloud hanging overhead. They had to move fast, but they also had to be smart. The last thing they wanted was to fall into another ambush. They reached a narrow pass between two towering cliffs. The path was barely wide enough for them to squeeze through, but it was the only way forward. They had no choice but to take the risk. As they carefully made their way through the tight gap, they heard the distant sound of something moving in the canyon behind them, a low growl that sent chills down their spines. The creature was closing in, and it was hungry. Suddenly the ground beneath them began to shake. The walls of the canyon seemed to tremble as if the earth itself was alive, and furious rocks began to fall from above, blocking the path behind them. With no way to go back, the only direction left was forward. Captain Gray cursed under his breath. They had been cornered by both the land and the creature. The canyon was a dead end. Team took a deep breath and prepared for the fight of their lives. They knew that they couldn't outrun the creature. It was too fast and too powerful. Their only option was to face it head-on and hope that the weapon would respond when they needed it most. Captain Gray's hand tightened around the weapon, its power thrumming beneath his fingers. He didn't fully understand it yet, but he knew that it was their only chance of survival. They set up a defensive position against the walls of the canyon, watching the entrance for any sign of movement. Every shadow seemed to hold the promise of death. The creature was out there somewhere, stalking them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Minutes felt like hours as they waited in silence, the air thick with anticipation. Finally the creature appeared. It stepped into the narrow pass, its massive form towering over the team, its glowing eyes locked onto them with a predatory gaze. Its jaws opened, revealing rows of sharp teeth that gleamed in the dim light. Captain Gray's heart pounded in his chest. As he gave the order to open fire, the team unleashed everything they had, but the creature was relentless. It moved with such speed and ferocity that their bullets seemed to have no effect. It was as though the beast was impervious to their weapons. They could feel the creature's power emanating from it, like a force of nature, and it was clear that this would be no ordinary fight. The weapon pulsed in Captain Gray's hands, its glow brightening with each passing moment, as if sensing the danger. Around them, the creature let out a deafening roar and lunged at the team with incredible speed. It was too much for them to handle. They scattered trying to evade its attacks, but the creature was everywhere. It struck one of the soldiers, knocking him aside with a single swipe of its massive claws. Captain Gray watched in horror as his team was torn apart. The creature was unstoppable, and the weapon seemed to be losing its effectiveness with each passing second. The more they fought, the more the creature seemed to grow stronger. It was as if the weapon was feeding off their fear and desperation, instead of providing the protection they needed. Desperate and out of options, Captain Gray made a decision that would change the course of the battle. He knew that they couldn't win this fight if they continued to use the weapon as they had been. He had to change their approach. He called out to his team to fall back and regroup. They had to try something different, something that would give them the edge they needed to survive. The team retreated to a narrow crevice between the canyon walls, using the terrain to their advantage. They had no choice but to rely on their wits and their instincts. Now the creature had forced them into a corner, but Captain Gray knew that they had one last chance to turn the tide. As they regrouped, Captain Gray focused on the weapon. Its energy was still strong, but it was fluctuating wildly. He could feel its power coursing through him, but it was no longer the calm and steady force it had been when they first discovered it. It was wild and untamed, just like the creature they faced. He had to find a way to harness that power to make it work for them, rather than against them. With a deep breath, Captain Gray reached out to the weapon. He closed his eyes and focused on his emotions. His fear, his determination, his will to survive. He didn't know if it would work, but he had to try. He had to believe that the weapon would respond to his inner strength, just as it had responded to his team's desire to protect. To his surprise, the weapon began to glow brighter. Its energy flared up, and for the first time since they had found it, it felt like it was truly under their control. Captain Gray opened his eyes and saw the creature charging toward them once more. But this time the weapon was ready. He raised it high and unleashed its power in a burst of energy that crackled through the air. The creature screamed in pain as the energy struck it, sending it reeling back. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Captain Gray and his team had a fighting chance. The weapon had responded to their will, and in doing so it had given them the power they needed to fight back. The creature was not invincible after all, and with the weapon on their side, they might just stand a chance at surviving the deadly hunt that lay ahead. The unexpected ally. The battle with the creature had left the humans battered and broken, yet the weapon they had once seen as cute had proven itself to be more than just a tool. It had become a force of nature, a living entity that responded to their will and their emotions. But the creature was still out there, lurking in the canyon, its power and savagery a constant threat. The humans knew that they couldn't keep fighting alone. They needed help, and they needed it fast. As Captain Elias Gray and his remaining team regrouped, they realized that they were not alone. In the canyon, a strange sound echoed through the narrow walls of the canyon, a low hum that seemed to vibrate in the very air around them. It was unlike anything they had heard before, not the growl of the creature, but something entirely different. Something far more serene, and yet oddly intimidating. The team froze, listening to the sound as it grew louder with each passing second. It was coming from the depths of the canyon. They had no idea what to expect, but they knew one thing for sure. Whatever was coming was not a threat, at least not to Thema. Figure emerged from the shadows. It was unlike anything they had seen before, a tall being with smooth skin and long, flowing robes. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. The figure moved gracefully through the canyon, as if it was part of the landscape itself. The humans stared in awe. This was no alien soldier or beast. It was something far more mysterious, something that emanated an aura of peace and wisdom. The being approached Captain Gray and his team without hesitation, its eyes locked onto him, and for a moment everything seemed to pause as if time itself had stopped. The weapon in Gray's hands pulsed softly in response to the being's presence, as if acknowledging it. The figure spoke in a voice that was both soothing and commanding. "I know what you seek, human, and I have come to offer you my aid." The voice was calm, but there was power behind it, a power that seemed to resonate deep within their souls. Captain Gray was taken aback. The last thing he expected was an ally from the depths of the canyon, yet here this being was offering them help in their time of need. He didn't know who or what it was, but he knew that this might be their only chance to defeat the creature and survive. "You know of the creature that hunts us?" Gray asked cautiously. "How can you help us defeat it?" The being nodded slowly, its expression unreadable. "I am not here to fight your battles for you, but I can offer you guidance. The creature that hunts you was not born naturally. It was created through the power of the weapon that you have come to rely on. It is a reflection of the weapon's influence, just as you humans are a reflection of the weapon's potential." The humans exchanged uneasy glances. The creature had been a product of their reliance on the weapon, but they had no idea it could be connected in such a way. It was clear that the weapon's power was far more complex than they had ever imagined. "I can show you how to control the weapon's power," the being continued, "but you must first understand that the weapon is not a tool to be wielded for your own gain. It is a force that is tied to the very fabric of the universe itself. It cannot be controlled by force or fear. It can only be guided by those who understand its true nature." Captain Gray felt a surge of hope. The weapon had saved them before, but it had also caused chaos and destruction. They needed to understand it fully if they were to survive this war against the creature. "Who are you?" Gray asked, his voice filled with curiosity and suspicion. "What do you want from us?" The being's gaze softened. "I am an ally of your kind, not a ruler nor a conqueror. I have watched your species grow from afar, and I have seen both your potential and your flaws. I have come to guide you on a path that will allow you to use the weapon's power wisely, to ensure that you do not fall into the same traps that have doomed other civilizations before you." Captain Gray listened carefully. The being spoke with such authority and calmness that he couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence. He had no idea what this being truly was, but it was clear that it knew more about the weapon than anyone else, and it seemed to be offering them a way to make things right. "How can we trust you?" Gray asked finally. "How do we know you're not leading us into another trap?" The being's eyes glowed brighter for a moment, as if in understanding. "You have no reason to trust me, except for the fact that I am here to help you," it said. "I have no interest in controlling you or your world. I only seek to prevent the destruction that could result from the weapon's misuse." Gray nodded slowly, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He knew that their fight wasn't just against the creature anymore. It was against the very nature of the weapon itself, and the only way they would survive was if they learned to use it responsibly. The being stepped forward and raised its hand, the weapon in Gray's hands pulsed in response. A brilliant light surrounded them both, and for the first time since they had found the weapon, Captain Gray felt a sense of peace. It was as if the weapon was acknowledging the being's presence, recognizing it as a guide and protector. "You must understand," the being said, as the light slowly dimmed. "The weapon does not care for your desires or your intentions. It does not serve your will. It is simply a reflection of the energy you give it. The more you try to control it, the more it will resist you. But if you seek harmony and balance with it, if you learn to align your will with its true purpose, then it will grant you the power to create and to protect." Captain Gray felt a shift within himself. It was as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders as the being's words sank. And for the first time he truly understood the weapon's power. It was not something to be wielded for personal gain. It was something to be nurtured, respected, and guided. The being stepped back and gave them a final look. "I will leave you now. The choice is yours. But remember this. The creature that hunts you is only the beginning. It is a manifestation of your own fears and desires, and if you are not careful, you will create many more just like it." With those words, the being turned and disappeared into the shadows of the canyon, leaving the humans to contemplate what had just transpired. They were no longer alone in their struggle. They had found an unexpected ally, one that had shown them the true nature of the weapon and the responsibility they carried. As the team regrouped, they knew that the battle was far from over, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, they felt ready to face whatever came next. The weapon had given them a chance to survive, but it was up to them to use it wisely. They had learned the hard way that power without understanding was dangerous, and now it was time to face the creature once more. But this time they would not face it as conquerors. They would face it as caretakers of a force far greater than themselves. The final stand. Canyon was alive with the tension of the coming storm. Captain Elias Gray and his team stood at the edge of the precipice, looking down into the dark abyss below. The ground seemed to pulse beneath their feet, as if the earth itself was waiting for the final confrontation. The weapon now glowed brighter than ever. Its energy had become more attuned to their thoughts and desires, yet its power was still unpredictable. The weight of the responsibility they now carried was heavier than they had ever imagined. The creature that had hunted them was still out there, and they knew they had no more time to waste. The team had learned much from the mysterious being who had appeared in the canyon. It had shown them the true nature of the weapon. It had guided them toward understanding the balance between creation and destruction. They had no more illusions about the weapon's capabilities. It was not a tool to be controlled, but a force to be guided. They had learned to align themselves with it, not to dominate it, but to coexist with it. They had learned that the weapon would respond to their emotions, their collective will, and their desires, but it would also push back against those who sought to manipulate it for selfish purposes. The creature that had once seemed unstoppable had now become a manifestation of their own fears and desires. It was the dark reflection of their collective will, and if they were to defeat it, they had to confront the darkness within themselves. Captain Gray knew that the creature was not just a mindless predator. It was a reflection of humanity's own potential for destruction and chaos, and the only way to defeat it was to confront that darkness head-on. Theme moved with purpose as they descended deeper into the canyon. The weapon pulsed in Captain Gray's hands, its energy responding to his thoughts as they prepared for the final stand. They knew that the creature was waiting for them somewhere in the shadows, but they also knew that they were no longer afraid. They had learned to harness the weapon's power, not through force or fear, but through understanding and unity. They had become stronger together, and they were ready to face whatever came next. As they reached the base of the canyon, the air grew thicker and more oppressive. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the ground beneath their feet became unstable. It was as if the entire canyon was shifting and reshaping itself in response to the weapon's presence. The team moved cautiously, aware that the creature could be anywhere. It was silent now, but they could feel its presence all around them. And then they saw the creature emerged from the shadows, its glowing eyes fixed on them with a hunger that sent chills down their spines. It was larger than they had ever seen before, its muscles rippling with raw power, its claws gleaming in the dim light. It was the embodiment of savagery and chaos, and for a moment, Captain Gray felt a flicker of doubt in his heart. But then he remembered the lessons they had learned. The weapon had responded to their will before, and it would do so again. This time they would not fight the creature with fear or violence. They would face it with unity and resolve. The creature snarled as it advanced on them, its jaws snapping with hunger. The team raised their weapons, but this time Captain Gray stopped them. He held up a hand signaling for them to wait. He could feel the weapon's energy stirring in his hands. He closed his eyes and focused on his thoughts. He could feel the power of the weapon flowing through him. It was not just a tool, it was an extension of their collective will, their hopes and their fears. He had to trust in that power. He had to trust in his team. "Focus," Captain Gray said softly, his voice steady and calm. "We face this together, not as individuals, but as one. The team nodded in unison. They knew what they had to do. This was not a battle for survival. It was a battle for their future, a battle for the future of humanity. They had to learn to control the weapon, not through domination, but through cooperation. They had to be united in their desire for peace and for creation, not destruction. The creature charged at them with a roar that shook the canyon to its core, but this time they were ready as the creature lunged. Captain Gray raised the weapon high and focused on his emotions. He felt the power of the weapon surge through him, but this time it was different. This time, the weapon did not react with destructive force. It responded to his will with precision and control. It flowed through him like a river of energy, shaping the very fabric of reality around them. The creature hesitated for a moment, as if sensing the change. It snarled, but the humans did not waver. They stood firm, their resolve unshaken. Captain Gray felt the weapon's energy respond to their collective will as they focused on one goal: to bring balance to the chaos, to restore harmony to the land. And then the weapon did something unexpected. It created a barrier of energy around the creature, trapping it in a field of light. The creature struggled against the barrier, but it could not break free. The energy was not meant to destroy it, but to contain it, to prevent it from causing any more harm. The weapon had recognized that the creature was a reflection of humanity's own fears and desires, and it had chosen to bind it rather than annihilate it. For a moment the canyon was silent. The creature was contained, and the weapon's power had been used not to destroy, but to preserve the balance. The humans stood in awe of what had just happened. They had faced the creature and overcome it, not through violence, but through understanding. They had learned that the true power of the weapon was not in its ability to create or destroy, but in its ability to bring balance to the world. Captain Gray lowered the weapon, his hands trembling as he realized what they had just accomplished. They had not defeated the creature by force. They had defeated it by confronting the darkness within themselves and choosing a different path. They had chosen to bring balance to the chaos rather than give in to it. The creature roared one last time, but its power was gone. It was no longer a threat. The humans had won, but they had won not by destroying their enemies, but by understanding their own fears and desires and learning to control them. As the weapon's energy began to fade, Captain Gray looked at his team. They were battered and bruised, but they had survived. They had faced the darkness within themselves and come out stronger for it. They had learned that power without understanding was dangerous, but power with unity and balance could create something beautiful. The battle was over, but the journey was far from complete. The humans had learned a valuable lesson, and now they had to carry that lesson forward into the future. They had to learn to live in harmony with the weapon and with the world around them, and they knew that the weapon would continue to evolve as they did. It was no longer just a tool. It was a part of them, and together they would shape the future with the creature defeated and the weapon's power finally understood. Captain Gray and his team knew that the hardest part was over, but the true test was yet to come. They had to ensure that the weapon's power would be used for good, that it would continue to bring balance to the world, and that it would never again be misused for destruction. The battle had been won, but the war for peace had just begun. A new beginning. The canyon lay still and silent beneath the fading light of the setting sun. The last echoes of the creature's roar faded into the distance as the hum of the weapon slowly dissipated into the air. Captain Elias Gray and his team stood at the edge of the canyon, gazing at the aftermath of their struggle. The battle had been long and brutal, but they had finally done it. They had faced the darkness within themselves and the creature that had manifested from their fears and emerged victorious, but the real work had only just begun. The weapon in Gray's hands no longer felt like the unpredictable force it once had. It had become something different, something that had changed not just the world around them, but also the humans themselves. It was no longer the cute little creature they had once seen it, as it had transformed into something much greater than they could have ever imagined. It was a reflection of humanity's desires and emotions, but more than that, it had become a symbol of balance, a force that could either create or destroy, depending on the will of those who wielded it. As Gray looked down at the weapon, he could feel its energy pulsing softly through his fingers. It had become a part of him, now a tool he could use, but not control a force. He could guide, but never dominate. He realized that this was the true power of the weapon. It was not to be used for conquest or domination, but for creation and for balance. It could help humanity build a better future, but it could also tear that future apart if they were not careful. Team gathered around him, each one of them carrying the weight of the battle they had fought together. They had seen the horrors the weapon could create, but they had also witnessed its potential for good. They had learned that the weapon was not just a tool to be wielded, but a force to be understood and respected. They knew that they had a responsibility now, not just to themselves, but to the world around them. "We've done it." Gray said, his voice calm but filled with the weight of the moment. "The creature is gone, and the weapon is under control, but we have to make sure it stays that way. We have to learn to use it wisely, to protect, not to destroy." One of his team members, Sergeant Julia Ramos, stepped forward. "But what happens now, Captain?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "We've seen what the weapon can do. We've seen its power, but we don't fully understand it. Do we just keep it and hope it doesn't turn on us again?" Gray nodded slowly. "No, we don't keep it to ourselves. We share it with the world, but with a promise that it will only be used for peace and for creation. We can't let greed or fear control it. We have to teach humanity to understand it, to live with it, not to control it, but to coexist with it." "But what if the world isn't ready?" another team member asked, his voice filled with doubt. "What if other nations or other beings try to use it for their own gain?" Gray took a deep breath and looked out over the canyon where the sun was now sinking below the horizon. "Then we'll be ready to stop them," he said. "We'll make sure that the weapon's power is never misused again. We will protect it, but we will also teach others how to use it responsibly." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the team felt a sense of peace settle over them. The creature was gone, the weapon was under control, and they had survived the battle, not through force or destruction, but through understanding and unity. They had learned that true power came not from domination, but from harmony and balance. As they made their way back from the canyon, Gray couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. The journey they had taken had been one of discovery, not just about the weapon, but about themselves. They had been forced to confront their own fears and desires, and in doing so, they had learned that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the ability to create and to heal. The weapon had shown them that there was another way, a way to build a future not through conflict and war, but through cooperation and understanding. It had taught them that they were not the masters of the universe, but caretakers of it. They were part of a larger whole, and their actions would ripple through time and space in ways they could not yet understand. As they returned to their base, Gray felt a sense of responsibility weigh on him more than ever before. They had to protect the weapon from those who would misuse it, but they also had to ensure that it was used to heal the world and bring about a better future. They had learned that power could be dangerous, but it could also be beautiful if used wisely. The world would not change overnight, but Gray believed that humanity was ready for the challenge. They had learned from their mistakes, and now they had the power to make things right. It was not just about controlling the weapon anymore. It was about guiding it and using it to help others. They had seen the consequences of misuse, and they had seen the beauty that could come from using the weapon for good. And now they had to ensure that the weapon's power would never be lost to greed or fear again. As the team settled back into their base, Gray looked out at the world before him. It was a world full of uncertainty, but it was also a world full of potential. They had the power to change it. They had the power to create a future that was better than the past, and they would not squander that opportunity. He held the weapon in his hands once more, its glow steady and calm this time. It felt like a friend rather than a force of destruction. It had changed them, and they had changed it together. They had come to understand it, and they had come to understand themselves. This was only the beginning. Gray knew that the journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long while he felt hope. He felt that humanity had the potential to rise above its flaws and create a future that was worth fighting for. The weapon had not only saved them, it had shown them the way forward, and now it was up to them to walk that path with wisdom and courage. The future was theirs to shape, and they would not let it slip away. The sun had set on the canyon, and a new day was beginning for humanity, a day full of promise and possibility. The world had changed in ways no one could have ever predicted. The weapon was no longer just a powerful force that could alter reality. It had become a symbol of what humanity could achieve when they chose to act with unity and understanding. It had revealed the truth about their own nature, that power was not something to be controlled or exploited, but something to be shared and respected. It was a lesson they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Captain Elias Gray stood at the front of the command center looking out over the horizon. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the world that had once seemed so broken and uncertain, but now it felt different. There was a sense of calm that had settled over the planet. The air was clearer, the land was healing, and humanity was beginning to rebuild. The weapon was no longer kept in secrecy. It was shared with the world, but not in the way anyone had imagined. It was not a tool of domination or power. It was a gift and a responsibility. Humanity had learned that the true power lay not in wielding it for personal gain, but in using it to uplift and heal the world around them. They had seen the consequences of misusing it, and now they were determined to ensure that such mistakes would never be repeated again. The team had disbanded, but their bond remained unbroken. They had gone through hell together and had emerged stronger for it. Each one of them had been changed by the weapon, but they had also changed the world in ways they could not have imagined. They had learned that survival was not enough. It was about finding meaning in the struggle and creating something better for the future. As Gray stood there, looking at the world before him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had seen humanity at its worst, but now he was seeing it at its best. They were no longer just survivors of a catastrophe. They were creators of a new world. They were the stewards of the planet, and the weapon was their guide. They had learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength came not from control or fear, but from balance and respect for the forces that governed the universe. The future was uncertain, but it was no longer a future defined by destruction. It was a future of possibility and hope. Humanity had been given a second chance, and they would not waste it. The weapon had shown them that with great power came great responsibility, and now it was up to them to shape the world with wisdom and compassion. Gray turned away from the window and walked toward the door. The world was waiting for them, and they had work to do. But as he stepped outside, he knew that they had made a difference. They had changed the course of history. They had turned the tide and given humanity a chance at a new beginning. As the team moved forward into the new world they had created, they did so with the understanding that they were no longer the masters of the weapon, but its caretakers. They had learned to coexist with its power, and they would continue to guide it with honor and respect. They had learned the true meaning of strength, and they would never forget the lesson that had brought them here. The weapon was no longer just a symbol of fear or destruction. It had become a beacon of hope, a reminder of what could be achieved when people came together to create a better world. The future was theirs to shape, and they would shape it with wisdom, love, and unity. And so the story ended not with a final battle or a great victory, but with a quiet understanding that true power lies in the ability to create, not destroy, in the ability to heal, not harm, and in the ability to guide, not control. Humanity had learned this lesson, and now it was their time to make a lasting impact on the world. They had faced their fears and emerged stronger, and now they would carry that strength into the future. The weapon was not just a force of nature, it was a reflection of humanity itself, and with it, they would build a world where peace and creation would always come first. End.